Slovenia. Today I want to give you a short introduction about hybrid cloud solutions and specifically how Microsoft sees the hybrid identity as the hybrid cloud scenario. So I will talk about, first I will give you a short overview about all, or let's say most important hybrid cloud solutions. We will not go deeply into that, and then in second part we will talk about the perspective of identity and how identity can become a hybrid identity. So first of all, I'm sure that many of you, if not all, have seen this picture multiple times. What I want to emphasize here is not that I don't want to go where we have data centers. There are multiple data centers available, and these present the public cloud where Microsoft provides public cloud services to organizations, individuals, etc. But when we talk about the hybrid solutions, it means that we are talking about how to connect what we have on our premises to something that will potentially run or sit in the public cloud. So when we talk about Microsoft hybrid cloud solutions, it means connecting our on-premises systems to Microsoft public cloud infrastructure. So how do we do this, and which are the solutions that we have? So first of all, on-premises, of course, we have applications, we have infrastructure, we have virtualization systems, we have fabric, so-called fabric, which is storage, we have network. On top of these applications or services which we provide to our users are running. So now, if we want to connect this to Azure, first of all, we need to have a network connectivity, and there are multiple possibilities how to connect our on-premises to Azure. Either we take a connection which is an internet connection, of course, or an encrypted line, or there we can also use a private connection. The difference between these is that, of course, if we do a private connection, we have a routed network which is extended from our local network to Azure, which means we can ping systems that run in Azure, we can install operating system instances, we can install applications, and of course those applications will be accessible from our premises, either through the private line. If we do an internet connection, then these systems will not be accessible, only the services which we explicitly connect, for example backup or Azure Site Recovery Service, will be accessible. So on the other side, when we talk about what we can extend, of course, infrastructure services, which means compute services. We can extend storage and network services, which is data services, partly running on premises, partly running in Azure. And of course, we can also extend application services, app services, where it means that part of our application can run in our data center on premises, and part of our application can run in Azure. So, of course, we want to manage everything. That's why we have System Center 2012 suite of management products, which means we can either provision both environments. In both environments, we can monitor both environments seamlessly, do the automation and other stuff. So let's look now at the hybrid cloud scenarios from identity management, identity and access management perspective. So we named all the scenarios previously on previous slide. We have infrastructure as a service for extending infrastructure. We have platform as a service for extending apps. We have hybrid storage like Store Simple, for example. We have management hybrid services like long-term backup or business continuity and disaster recovery for activation and orchestration purposes. But let's now talk only about hybrid identity. which was only briefly mentioned on the picture on the previous slide. So when we talk about identity, identity is actually the ID of entity, and it proves and enables that entity, which of course can be either a persona, it can be application, it can be system, it can be a lot of things. It proves that entity exists, it gives entity some attributes, it gives authenticity, which means it proves that someone who is saying I'm the one is really the one, and most importantly it gives that entity a chance to collaborate in environment. So now if we look in our environments, in our local environment, if we give our users an identity, for example in Active Directory, that identity will be able to collaborate in on-premises environment, but will not be able to collaborate in public internet, public services environment, internet environment using this identity. So of course we have different identity types. For example, we have two entities here, one tall, one short, one smiling, one bad face. They have also additional attributes like name, login name, most important tax number, and of course height. Why I'm saying this, my point is that not always applications or services authenticate or give access based on ID of identity. By the way, sometime in future probably the ultimate proof of identity will be based on the genome. Currently we're not yet there. We are using already some biometric means of proving identity. Genome is not yet there, mostly because we cannot guarantee that someone would prove that genome after we try to present it. So another example is this is an amusement park, and this is a facility called Blue Tornado, and when you come to this Blue Tornado, they actually don't care what's your name, what's your tax number, or what's your login name or email address. They don't care about these things. The only thing they care is actually the height. The minimum height required is 140 centimeters, which is an attribute of an entity which tries to access this facility. So my point in this case is you can correlate this type of access control to different scenarios, like for example doctor-patient, where doctor wants to see the patient records, and it doesn't really matter what is the doctor name and what the doctor's login name is, but it really matters whether this doctor is a chosen personal doctor of a person whose medical record he wants to or she wants to access. So when we come to the Microsoft has identity providers which can provide identity either locally inside premises by using Microsoft Active Directory, or even for public space. Microsoft has two very well known, not only two, but these are the most known identity providers. One, Azure Active Directory, and the other one, Microsoft Account, previously known as Microsoft Live ID. So these two identity providers providing users with identity enables users collaboration in the public space, for example using email in Outlook Home, or Office 365, or Xbox, or a lot of other services. Actually, Microsoft is collaborating with a lot of organizations, and currently there are more than 10,000 applications and services which can take Azure Active Directory as the identity proof when somebody wants to access a public service. When we come to the public services space, we have different personas. Of course, we have a citizen who wants to access different services in the government environment, potentially impersonating themselves as personas, potentially impersonating other personas, which means they can, for example, they want to register a company and they want to impersonate themselves as a representative of that company. In this case, we want to give this persona a different level of trust. For example, in some cases, we will accept their identity as an external public identity provider, like Facebook, Gmail, Microsoft account, or something like that. On some other cases, of course, we will not, because we don't trust these identity providers that they prove with enough certainty that identity is really the identity they claim. We will use the certificate, but only from the certificate authority which we trust, not the certificate authority itself, but the issuing policy which certificate authority uses to issue the certificate. So actually we want to trust that somebody really proves the identity when they give the identity. For example, sometimes I wonder how many system administrators of Active Directory actually know for whom they are giving the identity. They probably just get an email, please create the user account for this and this and this, give attributes, and at next moment that someone who receives these credentials can actively participate. So now whether that person is really the person with that name and other attributes is questioned. Mostly in organizations, human resource department is the one who checks the identity. So actually inside the government systems there should be identity management system which would automatically provision the identity in multiple directories, multiple identity providers internally when somebody joins the company. Similar goes for government employee, and similar comes to government IT, and of course for government IT is very important. They want to manage all systems in secure and efficient way. What are some authentication options? As we said, citizens, government employees, systems, they have different authentication options, from electronic identification cards, multi-factor authentication, very old method, username, password, etc., etc. If we again take citizens into an example of citizens, for example, a country of Estonia, they have a quite long tradition in giving their citizens an electronic ID with chip which they can use for electronic elections, for example. So they can be a digital identity and collaborate with the government over internet. Government of Estonia also give digital identity to other personas, entities inside European Union. For example, so it is possible for me as a Slovenian citizen to get an electronic ID digital certificate, so to speak, from Estonia. In this case, what I can do is I can, over internet, access the Estonian government site, and I can open a company, register a company, for example. One of the bad things here is that when Estonia gives me the digital identity, they want me to come to Estonia. They want me to give my fingerprint, and only then, once they establish my identity, that I'm really they will give me the digital identity. What I would really like is that government of Estonia would trust Slovenian government certificate systems, and they would trust that my digital certificate issued by my government really proves that I'm and they would allow me to register under my Slovenian credentials. There are some other projects going on, like, for example, cross-border authentication project called STORK. This is a project which works in this direction, that governments in Europe will trust each other, so it will be in future possible to collaborate in this manner. So I just want to emphasize that local Active Directory from Microsoft perspective is only one of the systems giving your users access internally in your systems. Of course, if you want to manage it efficiently, it means that it is best if you are consolidating these identities, and that you that your users, your entities do not have many identities. Of course, using identity management systems with this. If you actually have, and this is definitely the case always, you have multiple identity providers, then it is good to have a federation provider inside your system which allows that one identity provider actually trusts other identity provider so that user can use single sign-on capability when accessing different services. So what can you do to bring your local identities into the cloud and thus make your users be able to collaborate in the public space? So, for example, if somebody of your employees comes and says, oh look, I created username and password a specific service and now I forgot my password, dear IT, please make it right for me. And then, of course, administrator will ask, how did this end up on my desk, of course, and of course doesn't have a clue first that even that user was using that identity, was not provisioned by local organization, so it's difficult to manage these cases. If you use synchronization of local identities, which you have either in Windows Active Directory or other identity providers internally, you can synchronize these identities to Microsoft Azure Active Directory, which is one of the services under Enterprise Mobility Suite of services. There are other services which are available, like, for example, Azure Multi-Factor Authentication, providing multi-factor authentication for users, all these giving access either to applications in the internet, in public cloud, which are either under Microsoft control or potentially even third-party applications and clouds which already trust Microsoft Azure ID as an identity provider. So in the end, the solution would look something like this. You would have a local directory service. In optimal case, it would be consolidated using identity management solution, giving access internally, and you would have Azure Active Directory with synchronized accounts, which means you are controlling who has external identity, giving your users a chance, a possibility to collaborate in external world. Thank you.